Sanaka Samarasinha,
But we sit here?
This is your place?
постоянный координатор ООН в Беларуси.
Is it true that you was a journalist?
Yes, for a long time.
For a long time.
Well, that was how I started my career, yes.
О проблемах мигрантов и терпимости в целом к другим, приехавшим издалека, особенным или вернувшимся с самого дна. Точка зрения с Викторией Сенкевич.
Sanaka, nice to meet you and nice to see you here in studio. How do you feel in Belarus, actually?
Oh, it's great. Well, first of all, it's great to be here with you and in the studio. As we were talking before, I've been a journalist for many years, and
Yes.
it's always great to come back
Some
home.
nostalgia?
Very much so. Although I spent my time behind cameras more than in front of cameras, but it's always nice to be in a studio. So thank you very much for inviting me. And as for how do I feel in Belarus,
Yeah?
after now more than 3 years, it really does feel like home.
So what do you think, how is the situation with human rights in Belarus? Well,
I said it there as well, that I think one of the worst things that anybody can do for human rights is to actually politicize human rights. So, when people ask me about human rights in Belarus, first of all, I start by saying there are human rights issues in every country, including my own, including the United States of America, the EU countries, and elsewhere. So Belarus is no exception. Human rights is not only political rights, it's not only civil rights, it also includes health, education, so it's socio-economic and cultural rights. So there are challenges in some areas, and there is progress in other areas. This also we must acknowledge, and I do this all the time. And when somebody says, oh, but is the United Nations able to work on human rights in Belarus? I say, but we are working on human rights all the time. If you're working with people living with HIV and helping them to access treatment, if you're working with people with disabilities and helping the government to now implement the convention that it signed last year, if you're working on gender issues, if you're working on unemployment issues, these are all human rights issues. So yes, we do work on human rights. At the same time, I think it's important to note that there is still some progress in certain other areas which we would like to continue to help Belarus on.
Belarus suggests 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN.
Mm-hmm.
How long is the way and where are we? 17
Sustainable Development Goals was signed on to by all the world's leaders last year. What we call the 2030 agenda came into effect in January of this year. So it's from 2016 till 2030. We went through a very exhaustive process to ask people what is the kind of world you want to have in 15 years. And in Belarus we did that too. For 2 years we went through a process of talking to people. There was an online survey. Thousands of Belarusians went and filled out the survey, and they said these are the things that we want. We want better health, we want better education, we want better infrastructure, we want a crime-free society, we want better governance, more transparent governance, we want to eliminate poverty, we don't want to be hungry, and we want to protect our planet. So these are the goals.
So about the future and responsibility, the big problem today is addiction. Alcoholic, drugs, etc. Why it's so big problem today? Why so many people, young people, are addicted?
This is a very serious problem for Belarus, but of course it is also a very serious problem for many countries around the world. Alcohol is a particular problem, and doesn't only affect young people, as you know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Belarus has one of the highest per capita consumption, especially amongst men, and we see this much.
What is the reason?
So there are a number of different reasons. One is that we have I believe that when you have a society that does not fully understand and comprehend the consequences, or maybe you think that you can delay the consequences, or that yes, there are consequences, but it will not happen to me.
Yeah.
Then you start engaging in risky behavior. And it's actually human nature to think, you know what, I can have a party now and somebody will clean up tomorrow. You know? So I can, let's say, abuse my body now. I know that, you know, if you smoke you get cancer, but I also know somebody who lived till 100 years old.
And I don't know what will be tomorrow, for example.
Exactly.
With me and
Exactly. So there is, I think, and one of the things that we're trying to do is to, we've started a program to focus particularly on what we call non-communicable diseases. 96% of the people who die in Belarus die of cancer or cardiovascular diseases. Much of it is linked to the use or abuse of alcohol and tobacco. At the same time, you have, as you know, a life expectancy disparity between men and women.
Yeah.
It's much worse in the rural areas, quite significant. And that is also directly linked to alcohol abuse. Men in Belarus consume per capita around 30 liters per annum of pure alcohol.
okay.
So that is a significant amount of alcohol. Now, you also have a serious problem in Belarus with child injuries, preventable injuries to children. Quite a lot of it is linked to the fact that parents are alcoholics and there is a lack of parental supervision. Then you have a serious problem as well with domestic violence, which we're helping to change. And I hope this year with the government we will be able to introduce a law specifically on domestic violence, also linked to alcohol. And you asked me the question, why is this? And this is one of the things. You know, we historically in such situations we go out there and put posters, give lectures to people, you know, maybe bring a famous person to say don't drink, don't smoke. And Daria Damrachova, for example, is the UNDP's goodwill ambassador here in Belarus, and she's great. You know, she works on a lot of these public campaigns with us. But sometimes you think, you know, if you want to really get through to somebody who's addicted to drugs, maybe you need somebody who was addicted to drugs before to actually go and speak to that person who's still addicted, a sort of a peer-to-peer program.
Каждый день, вот уже на протяжении 4 лет, Павел проделывает один и тот же маршрут в кабинет заместительной терапии. В 7 утра у него прием метадона. Павел – наркоман с 20-летним стажем.
У меня оставалась последний вагон и последняя электричка. У меня другого выбора не было.
Это такой страх, что вам не передать. Это было все выносилось из дому. Все, что не покупалось, все выносилось. До 12 ему лет он был у нас один. Мы каждый год ездили на юга, каждый год.
Был осужден, мне дали химию. Приехал на химию. Там человек из 200, человек там 30 скололись, и мои знакомые с моего района. Ну, там попробовал. Все, и пошло-поехало.
Мы хотели его убить. Мы хотели его убить. Но вот если бы мы его бросили, уже бы его не было в этой жизни.
10%, которые хотят уйти, которые давно на программе состоят, большую часть молодежь. Ну, сами понимаете, он пришел, он еще жизнь не прожил, как бы, только начал колоться, узнал, что есть такая программа, он думает, что здесь бесплатный наркотик дают.
Далеко не разновидность героина. От него пациенты не получают вот этого чувства эйфории, которое получают от как вы уже сказали, героина. Но при этом метадон, принимаемый здесь, он снимает абстинентный синдром, и у пациентов нет вот этих осложнений в виде боли в суставах, в конечностях. Пациенты, получая здесь метадон, они перестают воровать, они перестают, опять же, через инъекционные пути передавать ВИЧ-инфекцию.
Те люди, которые стоят давно, у них цель не то, что прийти сюда, получить что-то бесплатное, а у них цель жить нормальной жизнью, устроиться на работу, создать семью.
К осени Павел поставил цель – уйти из программы и навсегда закрыть тему наркотиков. Сейчас он работает в общественной организации, участвует в семинарах по всему миру, в свободное время ходит в театр и пишет картины. Учится жить нормальной жизнью.
What do you think about methadone therapy?
I was about to get to that. So, for instance, one of the things that we're doing is we have 19 points around the country where you have methadone substitution therapy.
Is it successful or?
It's highly successful. I have been to several of these places and talked to people who are taking this methadone substitution therapy, and it's phenomenal, the transformation in their lives. You know, they've gone from being criminals because they had to, of course, support their drug habit, which for some people it was costing them more than $50 a day.
Yeah.
Of course, they didn't have the money, so they were stealing the money. And then they were injecting drugs. So it was very risky. They were sharing needles, and in the process, they were also being infected with HIV.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, of course, they become unproductive in society. They cannot work. Their lives collapse, their families collapse, and they become a real burden to society. What I saw in these places, in the methadone substitution therapy points, you know, were people who have picked up their lives. They were, again, parents. They were husbands. They were wives. They were employees of companies. And yes, they were still coming to the methadone substitution therapy points.
There are different opinions. It's expensive.
Well, that's the point. I mean, I would argue, and in fact, we did a study in Gomel Oblast to show the financial burden of injecting drug users, whether you're spending on law enforcement, or you're spending on health care, or you're taking care of children of drug addicts, etc. It's a huge cost to society, to the economy. Not to mention the fact that they're unproductive in the labor force. They're not producing anything in the labor force. The flip side of it is that methadone substitution costs $1 a day. $1 a day.
For one man.
For one person.
For one person.
As opposed to that person going and stealing from somebody else and getting $50 to inject drugs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's simple math. Financially, as far as I'm concerned, there is no argument against methadone substitution therapy. It does take quite a long time, and for some people it might be for very long or forever. But look, I take statins for high cholesterol, and that's for life, okay? What it helps me to do, it's a drug. What it helps me to do is to lead a reasonably normal life, okay? Without it causing complications to me, or without it causing complications to my family. What if I have a heart attack, etc. So my point is, taking a drug per se is not the issue. The issue is an addiction to a drug that does not allow you to behave and act as a good citizen. That's the question. And for me, I think that methadone substitution, actually, it is a drug, but it gives an opportunity for somebody who is addicted, who's a criminal, who's unproductive in the labor force, who is a problem for the community, for society at large, an opportunity to now be once again a good citizen of the country.
How could other people live side by side with such people with addicted?
So it's not enough just to simply dispense methadone once a day and say, okay, now it's fine. You have to have psychological support. You have to also work with the families to help them to help these people. You have to eventually look at ways that they can be employed, because they can't be just sitting at home, and they want to actually work, most of them that I have spoken to. So it is a program. It's a comprehensive program: psychological, emotional, economic support.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, the people feel dangerous to live side by side with addicted with.
You know, fear of other people who we think are different to us stems mostly from a lack of understanding. And a lack of understanding stems mostly from a lack of knowledge. So I'm a scuba diver, right?
Yeah.
I love to dive. But I didn't always love to dive. There was a time that I was, even though I come from an island and I love to swim, the idea of going 20 meters into the sea scared the living daylights out of me. So then I decided I was living in Samoa, a small island in the Pacific at one time. I said, oh, great opportunity, I'm going to learn how to dive. What do you do when you learn how to dive? You go through a 3-day course on understanding the ocean, on understanding how to deal with certain situations that might occur, like a current, etc. You understand the creatures that are in the ocean, and the next thing you do, so once you do that, you go from being afraid to actually embracing the beauty of what is around you. So for me, fear can only be dispelled if we can help people understand. And so it's really important. You say, oh, people are afraid. Yeah, people are afraid of people not just injecting drug users. People are afraid of people living with HIV, for example. I remember this in the mid-1980s, when the first person who was HIV positive in Sri Lanka, became publicly known. It happened to be a relative of mine. And I still remember people were even afraid to go into the same room as this person, because they don't understand just precisely. Now the world has changed, but there is still fear, and as a result of the fear there is stigma. Take disabilities. When I was a kid, my parents had a friend who was a photographer. And this photographer had some kids, and one of the children was my age. I was about 4 or 5, but she had a mental disability. And
which kind of?
She was autistic.
Okay.
But I was not even 5, maybe 4. She was 4, and I was so scared of this child.
No, really?
Because she was different. And I remember every time I went to this house, I was terrified, because this child would come and try to speak to me, but I was like, this child is different to other children, I don't know, and I'm scared. And I still remember, because this gentleman used to take photographs all the time when we used to go, and so I used to associate this child with anybody who came up to me with a camera. So if you look at my pictures till I was about 10 years old.
Do you have some?
I don't have any with me, but every single picture you could see the fear on my face. I looked like as if I was about to cry, because I associated a camera with this child who had a mental disability. I was so afraid of her. But you know what my parents did? They didn't stop taking me there. They kept taking me there more and more and more.
Stressful?
No, eventually I actually began to, for me, this child was now normal. I understood her, I knew how to interact with her, and I think from that day onwards, it was a cause for me that we must fight stigma against people with disabilities, physical or mental.
So people with disabilities, how do they feel in Belarus?
Well, you have approximately 540,000 people with disabilities registered in this country, out of a population of a little over 9.5 million. That's a lot, but it's not much more than the overall average around the world. You have 1 billion people in the world with some form of disability. Now, I ask people to guess. I ask Belarusians, usually when I talk about this issue, I ask them to guess. How many people do you think live in this country with disabilities? And usually people come up with very small numbers, far from the reality. And it is because they say, well, we don't see them. Where are they? You walk out in the streets and you don't see people on wheelchairs,
No.
you don't see people with white canes. So it is the invisible population, right?
Yeah.
But the fact is that you don't see them
What
because
is the
there are
problem? What?
they're because of all the barriers that are they whether they are physical barriers or economic
Mentality.
barriers, social barriers. So one of the things that we've tried to do is we've started a campaign that we've called Inclusive Belarus. So there are three things that we would like to do in this Inclusive Belarus campaign that we've already started, and we're taking it all around the country during the course of this year. Is first of all, we want to try to help people understand that there is such a thing as exclusion, that there are people in their country, in their communities, perhaps even down the street, who are excluded for some reason or the other, that they don't
Who are
have.
special? Just
Who are special,
special.
yes, but also are unable to
Yeah.
live like you and I because of these kinds of barriers that I talked about. So we need to make people understand that, because people say, oh, we don't see them, so they don't exist, right? So one is creates this awareness that there are people all around you who are different maybe to you in some way or the other, but actually they're still
But
the
they are
same.
people.
They are people, exactly. So that's for us. Second thing, I think what we would really like to change is the fear that just because somebody looks different to you, or somebody talks different to you, or somebody dresses different to you, or somebody has a different economic background, he's a poorer person, or has a disability, or was at one time an injecting drug user, there's nothing to be afraid of. And like my diving story, if you really understand, then you won't be afraid. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is, if we can get the people who themselves feel excluded by society, if we can empower them and make them feel confident that yes, they're different, yes, they may be legally known as disabled, but maybe they have different abilities. So take people with autism, for example. I was just in Denmark, and I'm trying to work with an organization in Denmark and organizations here, because autistic children are much, much better in certain aspects of the IT industry than you and I would ever be, because they have the patience. They can actually sit and do a 50,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. I don't know, I can't even do a 500 piece, right? So they have different abilities.
Сколько коробочек больших было? На два. Получается 12.
Еще в прошлом году Коля ходил в специальный класс для детей с нарушением слуха. Сегодня он ни в чем не уступает новым друзьям в обычном классе. Ни в процессе обучения, ни в спортивных баталиях.
Мы вместе ему помогаем, вместе вот так вот. Бывает, что я ему помогу, бывает, что он мне поможет.
Если есть возможности, то есть видим, что ребенок может учиться в обычном классе, мы переводим из специального в обычный класс. Ну а все остальные мероприятия мы проводим вместе с детьми. И массовые, мы их абсолютно не отделяем.
Каждый третий ребенок в этой школе с особенностями. Но для педагогов ученики равны. В начальной школе с детьми с нарушением слуха занимаются специалисты. Это сурдопедагоги. Парты в классе специально расставлены полукругом, чтобы ребята могли видеть учителя и при необходимости считывать информацию с губ.
Называется кривицей, потому что это братья крови.
Братья по крови.
А здесь и вовсе занятия 1 на 1. Это специальный акустический класс, в котором индивидуально работают над развитием слуха и речи.
Слушай внимательно. На улицах города большое движение.
Перевод из спецкласса в обычный скорее исключение, нежели правило. Чаще серьезные предметы, математику или языки преподают в разных аудиториях, а интеграция проходит на ритмике и пении. Методика проверена годами. Школа опробовала инклюзивное обучение 30 лет назад.
Закончила в этом году выпускница, девочка из Смолевич. Папа возил 11 лет. Как папа сам сказал, он несколько раз объехал земной шар, пока дочь возил в школу.
Несмотря на большую любовь к математике, Коля мечтает стать футболистом. Сейчас болеет за Барселону и хочет быть похожим на бразильского нападающего Неймара.
If you are going to create some artificial world for your child, then you're not helping your child, because when that child grows up, they will suddenly realize that they're not equipped to handle with a diverse world. So they won't know how to handle it. So you're not helping your child. And secondly, I think what you also doing is that in the process that you will create friction in society. It is every time you start identifying yourself as being different to somebody else, all you're doing is building walls.
Москва, через неделю Бишкек, Астана. Житель Орши Алексей Талай занимается большой благотворительной работой. Мечтает создать международный фонд поддержки молодых инвалидов. Алексей – успешный бизнесмен, заботливый муж, отец 3 детей. 17 лет живет без рук и ног.
Да? Да, привет, брат. Ну, все хорошо. Дома сейчас вот тут занимаемся. Подъезжай к нам, посидим, почаевничаем.
В 99-м, накануне Дня Победы, Алексей подорвался на мине времен Великой Отечественной. Ему было 16. Врачи едва вытянули с того света.
Я много об этом думал и анализировал. О произошедшем, о моих шагах к преодолению, как я пришел к дню сегодняшнему. Я понял одно. Если бы тогда, еще в реанимации, либо уже в госпитале в военном, где врачи спасали мою жизнь, я, вы знаете, обиделся на что-то, начал искать виноватых. Если бы это тогда началось, не было бы меня сейчас.
Он запретил себя жалеть, себе самому и окружающим людям. Дал слово, сделает все, чтобы больше не видеть слез мамы.
Лешенька, послушай, что ты мне как-то обещала, что по садоводству ты мне где-нибудь полазишь, покажешь там. Сейчас у меня рассада, помидоры, огурцов. Хорошо. И как бы что-то стоят на одном месте.
Найдем, надо тебе вообще самой приобщаться.
Да.
Сегодня у Алексея свой бизнес. В центре Орши вместе с младшим братом открыли магазин спортивных товаров. А еще у него 2 сыновей, Марк и Влад. И дочка Даша. Она мечтает о сестренке.
Харизма человека, все это как-то по-другому. Оно не дает обращать внимание на какие-то физические недостатки. Я увидела в нем мужчину, в первую очередь, да, и интересного мужчину.
Они путешествуют, часто бывают на природе. Недавно купили старый дом на берегу озера, заложили сад и встречают там незабываемые закаты.
Он все это придумывает, он все это как бы планирует. Когда там нужно, допустим, крышу починить, когда окна поставить.
То, что Алексей называет обычной жизнью, многие считают подвигом. Ведь он доказал, даже не имея рук и ног, можно быть человеком с безграничными возможностями.
I like telling this story, saying, I went, to Liberia about 1.5 years ago to help with the fight against Ebola.
Yeah.
And some people ask me, why are you going? I mean, you're working in Belarus, right? You don't need to go there, right? So. Why did you have to volunteer to go there? You're trying to be a martyr, and a Superman or whatever. But the reason is this, and this is what these parents need to understand. Ebola is today in Liberia.
Yeah.
But we realize that it doesn't stay in Liberia. Ebola that appears in Liberia ends up in New York, in Amsterdam. A conflict in Syria ends up in the streets of Paris. A conflict in Donbass has an impact in Minsk.
So let's discuss this problem with migrants, with refugees. Where is the limit of patience, of tolerance?
This is a very, very difficult question. And I think, sadly, we're probably going to see more of it than less of it. So one of the things that we need to do is to look at the source. Where are these people coming from? Where are they likely to come from? And as much as possible, preempted, to think even into the future. We should think of where might be the next Syria. And we need to act before a crisis to try to either prevent a crisis or to mitigate the consequences of crisis. This is number one. I think secondly, in terms of people who are now coming, it is very important that we distinguish between those who have a legitimate claim to asylum status or are displaced because of a conflict, and others who may be more opportunistic.
It's a legal process. It's really expensive to come to Europe.
But that's the thing. So these people are spending all their life savings, maybe even borrowing money, risking their lives in flimsy boats and so on, and paying it to these unscrupulous criminals who are exploiting human suffering for their own gains.
It's a business now.
It's a terrible business, and and we have helped in some ways, unfortunately, to let that kind of business flourish, because we don't have a proper process of screening and bringing people over. And then finally, I think, we have to think of this as a collective responsibility. It is impossible for any one or two or three countries to deal with this, and so it's really a global, I think, response that we need, not just only a European one even.
We in Belarus have the same problems, the same question after the crisis in Ukraine.
Well, first I should recognize the fact that actually Belarus has really done a good job. The government has done a good job to provide services to those who came from Ukraine. At the same time, I think that we're fortunate, and I hope it will never happen, but if it did happen, that you had 1 million, for example, or 2 million displaced people coming to Belarus, it would be very difficult, even for Belarus.
We have 10 million in Belarus at all.
Exactly. So can you imagine if you suddenly had 2 million people coming here who were displaced? And that's the reason, that's the point I was trying to make. We can't just simply think that we can guard our borders if people start coming. So what is the plan? If, hopefully never, but if this were to happen, what is the plan? Do we have a plan? And that's one of the things that we would like as a UN, I think, to help Belarus to think about, have a contingency plan, talk to its neighbors, talk to other countries, etc., to Russia, to Ukraine, of course, but also the EU countries. There is a fear, these people are different, they have a different religion, they speak a different language, they look different, they're just coming here to get as much opportunities and take what we have.
Is it not true?
But you see, look at me. In some ways, you can say I'm a migrant worker too, right? I'm here. I'm not from Belarus. I'm doing a job, and I'm hopefully doing something useful for your country. And I've come from far away. But it wasn't always like this. When there was a war in my country, I went to the United States because the universities were closed in Sri Lanka at the time. And I was, as you know, I was a journalist, and it was a very tough place for a journalist to be during that time. And so I was in the United States, and people may have said, who's this guy, is coming and, like a refugee from a country that is in conflict. Well, I went to university, I became a lawyer, I hope I contributed something to American society. I lived there for 15 years, and I think that, we have to stop thinking of people who are different to us as people who are going to take everything. This is part of the problem, I think. The people feel that whatever it is that we have is going to be taken away from us because we don't understand that they can actually give us possibly more than what we have already now. I hope I've contributed something to Belarus. Have I? I'm not sure.
I hope so. Where is home for you? What does the word home mean for you?
Well, I think Sri Lanka is always going to be home for me because, you know, it's where I grew up and it's where my parents live. But it's also only one home. Perhaps it's for me one root, maybe the solid root of a tree. But I've lived in 20 some countries, and I of course have developed strong links to most of these countries, and so I think, you know, I could easily consider any of those places home, including Belarus now after more than 3 years.
Thank you.
Will you want me to stay?
Sure. You're welcome always. Thank you for your time, for your opinion, and for your open mind.
Thank you very much. It's been great. Thanks.
Really nice from you.